Okay, I'm back. I didn't do anything except turn it off and turn it on. Okay, because this is a little thicker here, I'm just going to braid down and make sure I'm on flint instead of Cortex and switch back to the lead bopper and hit one inward right there. And I had it pushed back into my hand here, and I had my finger underneath the front, and I was just pinching gently in the middle, but not really doing anything in the middle. So what I'm doing there is I'm hitting with a pretty darn big, second biggest commercial type bopper, and I'm hitting something that's very light. So by making it rigid in the back and can't go downward in the front, and hitting at an angle that drives that flake almost straight inward, what I'm doing is I'm artificially making this thing weigh a lot more than it does, and that's where I get my run from. So now I got this fanned out because there was no ridges, and I ran over here. I could hit right there and take that off, but I may mess up my ridge here if I did that, so I think I'm going to go ahead, hit this ridge. And I caught that too high, way too high, but because my finger was underneath it fairly well and I was supporting it fairly well, it didn't hurt anything. It still ran the flake to there. It didn't break the piece. It didn't put the bending forces downward that it would have if I hadn't supported it right. You can get away with a heck of a lot if you learn to instinctively support your stuff the way that it needs to be. Because like right here, I've got my finger underneath that in such a manner that if I overstrike and catch it too hard, it just doesn't hurt anything. Okay. I could step down to, I don't even know what I did with that. Oh. This is kind of the medium-sized bopper. And I can step down to that, and in theory, it can even work better. But there's one trade-off, and that is that to a certain extent, you're always trying to decide, okay, should I use the tool that I'm most familiar with, that I have most instinctive gee whiz accuracy or whatever from having done it so much? Do you master a few tools, or do you have a bunch of tools that the tool itself is optimal for what you're trying to do? And there's people that believe both ways. So, because I do know people that they want to use one tool all the time and they get awfully good with that one tool. And then there's folks that have a tool for everything. And 47 toolboxes to keep them all in. Am I staying in frame? When you're starting out on a flake like this, at some point, you start shaping it down to kind of the outline that you're going for in general, but at the same time, you're trying to get things regularized, like no real high spots, no super low spots. I'm cleaning, I'm straightening up, I'm regularizing, and you work towards your general shape. And the amount of effort that I'm still kind of pushing them inward. I'm not hitting straight down. I'm not getting the 45-degree angle so much. I'm trying to compromise a little bit. The degree to which you focus on one or the other of those things I mentioned depends on what the rock tells you as to what you can get away with. If you've got a whole bunch more rock than you need, you can be kind of wild and the phasing of it all doesn't matter as much. And if you use indirect, it doesn't matter as much, because with the indirect, I have greater flexibility as to when I start attacking issues and how aggressive, how much I try to do with any given thing. I can attack later and remove more thickness, or I can attack earlier and try and have things under tremendous control. But see how that's sort of going inward a little bit, not just straight downward, and it's thickening up. So that thickening up is useful to me, because now if I want to, I can really thicken up, get my edge really good, and I can start shooting some flakes. I didn't optimize things before this. Like, see how rounded that punch is? Usually I like it a little more tapered toward the point. Where are you? I like it a little more tapered toward the point. And I do that initial tapering to get it just like I want it, sometimes with a grinder, like, I mean, a rotary thing. But as I use it, it tends to end up roundeder, and so I haven't fixed that, so oh well. I'm trying not to kick my stand, because I'll probably lose you if I do. Okay, so now I have a choice. I can try and hit it with slower force and get longer, more controlled flakes, or I can hit it with a faster force. And here's the problem. There's no ridges on this. And Georgetown really needs ridges. Georgetown likes to do its own thing and doesn't care what you want when it doesn't have ridges. It fans out, but sometimes in the fanning out it breaks off and or divots, because it's fairly easy to hit stuff. Very rambly today. But we're gonna do it anyway, and then we're just gonna fix whatever we mess up later. And I'm gonna be really wild and use the moose, which is shockier and tend to make the flakes break more. And I'm gonna try and pull in tight up against the punch in order to make up for that. So I'm pulling tight up against the punch, if I can get my leg to grab it right. Pulling tight up against the punch and hit. And it just, so what's happening on there is, see, there's no flint there. Where are you? Where are you? This is crazy. There's no flint there. And when there's no flint there with indirect, you're just blowing through the cortex. In fact, you've got to, on this stuff, I got to just drop it on here gently. And against intuitiveness, counterintuitively, when I'm hitting hard, it's not doing anything and blowing through it, and when I gently drop that on there, it drives it an inch. So that's the weirdness about switching from direct to indirect. If you're not used to indirect, you're gonna have to figure out a way, because you're putting that force into a real small area at a much higher load. So I was kind of digging in, and in this place, the cortex went on down into the rock more, so there's not much thickness there at all. This is what I need to find out. I got to uncover all this. There was thicker there, there was more meat there. I have to uncover all this stuff and see if I really actually do have the proper thickness in there to have a point. And if I don't, you know, at some point I just, before y'all can even say anything, I just throw the rock down, turn the video off, and say, oh well. Now you may think this guy is like the human molasses, the slowest napper that there is, which is highly embarrassing for me, but what I would tell you about that is I nap faster when you're not here. See, it split in the middle, but didn't matter because of the support and ran on down to here. I'm trying to grab I'm grabbing little ridges. It's not random on these where I'm putting this, and I'm pulling up tight on it and just dropping it on it up near the, never hit your punch far back from the edge. The punch is the tool, and the only reason you're not doing direct is because you can't hit the edge that accurately and that finely and put that much pressure in it. So you don't want to be hitting way back from it, because then you're putting springiness and load into it that you weren't counting on. I mean, you can do that, like for instance, because we've talked before about how all the variables work together. If you, for whatever weird reason, only have one striker, one thing that you have in your possession, you can't get anything else, and you got to use a striker you've got, and say your striker ended up being a solid bar of 1-inch copper. Well, that's a hard striker, and that's shocky as heck. And you're gonna be blowing through platforms all day long if you hit with that. But if you either have a soft holder to hit on, that helps, or you wrap it in something even softer, that helps, or it's skinny and long and you hit it back here to where it's like a bow where it's loading up a little bit, that helps. So there's all kinds of ways to create the same kind of variable forces with different setups and different tools. This is starting to look like some sort of big wide thing, but you and I both know. Although, you know, I could just make this a cortexy little andice, a unifacial flaked andice. Come in with the edges here some, run a couple of notches up there, and call it a day. Head for the heels, head for the house. Okay, so I want to show you that, and I showed you that, so now I'm still going inward a little bit. I'm not being super careful, but on the other hand, I am trying to hit it in such a manner that I don't put a huge lipping load down on the edge. I'm trying to drive inward a little bit and continue to push these things in a little bit while it coming in off the thinness, because you can't do anything with an ultra thin edge, and getting my outline shape, you know, a little more regular and reasonable than the randomness that I create when I'm doing these other things. And I guess in a way, one of my main failings, if you will, that I have mentioned before, that I don't worry about that much because I figure you can do your own way of dealing with that, is lack of organization. Some guys or gals are very organized and very controlled, and they start out immediately. They know what they're going to make when they start, and they start out immediately controlling the reduction to make it the fastest, easiest way to the finish and keep it controlled all the way. And I have done that, but I have done that usually when I had a problematic rock or difficult material or something and felt that I needed to have it controlled all the way in order to have it control at the end. I wasn't riding a bicycle backwards for once with my hair on fire. So there you go. I can put a couple of notches in that and just call it done. And put it online to sell it for $11,000.75. I have been struggling with pollen as usual this time of year. It's always something here. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 things here. You wonder why I'm not around all the time? I'll tell you. Okay, so first, number one, it gets hotter than a $3 pistol here a lot of the year. Number 2, I had the infinite wisdom to buy a house many years ago in an area that if the prevailing wind is as it tends to be, I'm gonna get pollution. And then at a certain time, we get the pollen. And we get pollen from heck-fired Maynard. You want a little wine with this cheese? Here's my wine. When we get the wind out of northwest, all that dang juniper, which they call it cedar fever, that juniper pollen comes over. We don't have those things here. I suffer because other people have deadly trees. But we have that, and so that pollen comes in and decimates me, which is kind of amusing if you think about it. Decimates me, think about it. Anyway, so then after that, the pine pollen kicks in, and the cedar's still hanging around. And at some point, like now, there's still a little bitty bit of cedar, but for the most part, everybody else is raining terror down upon me. And I'm talking garbage cans full of that stuff. I mean, I collect it for a month or so, seems like. Thinning more, but I'm still not driving it past the middle, so I guess one could argue that all I'm doing is creating edges a little more that I need to work then off to keep coming in. Nothing to guide it, spreading out, but did go in a ways. What was I saying? Oh, and I live in an area that has high humidity most of the time. More or less all the time when there isn't a norther. And we don't have northers that much. Usually the prevailing wind's from the south most of the year. So then we have the mold. And at some point we had a ragweed. What else can I whine about? Well, there's noise pollution, but at the moment, I don't know what happened. They must have moved the airport or something, because it seems like there aren't near as many planes at the moment. No idea why that could be. You got to be careful when you're doing this, because I'm not really helping myself to a certain extent with it. You're saying, well, that's nice, man. You got a nice big wide lash. You make your end eyes are going to be good. No, not really, because what I just did working off that thin edge and hitting in where I don't have ridges really is I'm getting the little bulbiness because the indirect is fast. And so these edges are not, I'm making the edges unsuitable to run another set on, so I'm going to have to come in more. But the problem is, since this is unifacial, because this is perfectly flat, what we're really looking at here, which I've said many times before, one of my favorite point types, I don't care if y'all like it, you're welcome to like it if you want to, but I'm not really sleepy about it either way, a Gary drill. Gary drills or the cats meow. All right, so what do I do with my little y'all? Oh, it really is hard for me to actually hold a conversation with y'all and also flint nap. I'll be right back.